Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 2025 Carbon Issue Forum of Boston/Northeast Reuse Working Group. Coming hot off the heels of Green Build and a lot of industry movement. Today, we have a presentation by Sydney Mainster of the Durst organization, I believe located in New York City area, to talk about glass, architectural glass, and the challenges that a lot of us face in our industry on disposal of it and what kind of circularity and recycling looks going forward. Before getting into that, Olivia, co-chair, anything to add?
Yeah, this was a topic that came up a few times, other people mentioning it, other people asking about it. So I'm glad that you can make it.
Yeah, very exciting. With that, Sydney, we'll hand it over to you. You should be able to screen share. I hope I set that up properly, and take it away.
So, as you mentioned, we've all been using these virtual meeting programs, and yet, do I know how to actually show my slides? We will see. I know you guys can see, but with the full slide deck, but I don't actually know what happens if I do presenter view. Let's see.
That looks good.
What are you guys seeing? Okay,
Looks
excellent. And I
normal.
apologize. I'm gonna reuse the slide deck that I presented last week. I can't even remember anymore, at the AAA New York, but it has a lot of good info in it. So please don't mind the title slide. I apologize. So yeah, really glad to be here today. My name is Sydney Mainster. I'm the VP of Sustainability and Design Management for the Durst organization. Thanks again for inviting me to speak to you all. Although I'm an architect, I work for a real estate company, and if you are not familiar with the Durst organization, it's a 105-year-old family-run, privately held real estate owner operator in New York City. We have about 12 million square feet of commercial office space in the portfolio, very large buildings that you may recognize. And we also have about 3,500 rental residential units that we develop, own, and manage. In New York, a lot of times I talk about the potential of urban mining, so apologies for some of these slides, but I'm probably preaching to the choir here that urban mining, meaning mining our existing buildings for feedstock for use in a future built environment, has a lot of potential. These are statistics for New York State. There's both job growth and some horrifying statistics that in our state, about 60% of materials annually are discarded from buildings. I think I'd also like to set the context, and you guys may talk about this within this group, about embodied carbon. A lot of attention is given to the superstructure and the envelope as the major source of embodied carbon when you're making decisions during design. And I don't disagree that really trying to reduce embodied carbon for those components makes a critical impact on the overall embodied carbon of the building. But what's interesting is about this L&M study is that if you think about embodied carbon over time, the piece that is not maybe not perceived as having an impact, as big an impact, is the interiors. And so really over the life of a commercial building, those can start to add up and actually exceed the embodied carbon impacts of the superstructure and those higher actors, those most focused on actors. So in terms of glass recycling, we for a while on the interiors in our building have engaged in reclamation and selective deconstruction for different materials like carpet tile, ceiling tile, drywall for take back and removal, but we never focused on interior glazing. And this came out of, the idea to do this came out of a conversation with CertainTeed. We had piloted closed loop drywall recycling with them on our 2 multifamily towers in Astoria, Queens. And it went really well. And we said, well, what else could we partner on? And they said they were looking at glass. So for the first time, we as an entity recaptured 22 tons of interior glass from the office fit out you see here. This was our these were our offices at One Bryant Park, which we needed to move out of, and we're now relocated into a different building. It's interesting to think about interior glass as an opportunity for deconstruction, because if you think about the exterior, we often don't focus on it because the glass might last 50 years, and certainly if you do a reclad, it's a one-time effort and an opportunity to recapture that glass. But on the interiors, the glass only lasts between 8 to 10 years. That's the average lease length in New York City. So the feedstock available in here for us is pretty significant. So how is this even possible, and why is this possible, and why did we want to do this? Well, turns out that if you recapture architectural glass, which is now made possible by a recycler out of Minnesota who's developed a mechanical means of taking laminated, coated glass with films, any type of architectural flat glass, and able to separate out those films and recapture and turn it into cullet. If you put it back into something like fiberglass, which is what we did with this project, it reduces the embodied carbon of the fiberglass by 1/3. And that is because they can burn their furnaces at a lower temperature, and which in turn means both financial savings and energy savings for the production of the product. What was interesting from a means and methods perspective is that with this effort, we didn't have to keep the glass whole. So as you can see here, we didn't train anybody. We'd already awarded. Did we award demo? Excuse me. This was prior to award of demo, so we did actually get it in the demo contract. But they were able to just sledgehammer the glass and put it into wheelbarrows and bring it down to a 30-yarder, which was hauled by the glass processor themselves. If this video plays, be satisfying to watch. So they just do that. There was a joke that we should offer this as like a stress removal opportunity for those who might like it. But I think the moral of the story is that we had a really tight time frame for demo, about 4 weeks, and we were able to fit this in at no additional cost and no impact to timing. We had a lot of discussions with the demo contractor ahead of time because this was the first time they were going to site separate out glass, but turned out actually working really well in terms of the sequence of demolition. Sorry. So why is glass? Why glass, and sort of this hidden material that is right in front of our eyes as an opportunity for reclamation and recycling? There are about 12 million tons afloat manufactured in the U.S., and to date, 25% is recycled into cullet, and that's exclusively from the float line from pre-consumer sources. Our interior reclamation project was the first time a post-consumer source of architectural glass was recaptured, processed, and used for a certainteed product in the U.S. So this was a proof of concept for them, which was really exciting for us. I will say it was not the first time we at Durst have done this, and perhaps you guys have done this on projects as well. You can take, and we have had success with one project taking exterior single pane glass when we were doing a reglaze, but we took it and we actually did turn it into pozzolan as a Portland cement replacement in concrete. And it's not that you can't technologically do it. It's just for us at the time when we did it back in 2017, 2018, we required that the sheet stayed whole. And in order to remove a UV film that had been applied, the guys had to use razor blades and like physically remove the film before it could get processed, which became actually really dangerous for the guys doing the work. It was labor intensive, and it was, again, not the main material stream for the pozzolan producer. They did it as a proof of concept for us. So there are other projects that have happened since that original pilot. I think there's some consigli folks on the call. I was so excited by the fact that I had found this producer out of Minnesota that I called a colleague of mine and asked if there might be another project they could pilot this on. And so we actually did try it on an exterior, and it worked very, very well. So our interior captured about 22 tons, and this pilot here in White Plains recaptured about 40 tons, and they're now moving on to phase 2 of the project. So after those 2 pilots, we had started to convene and I kind of went on a hearts and mind tour and started to talk to people about this effort, and got more and more people. I got connected with more people, and more and more folks decided they were not crazy enough, but they were willing to try this for the first time. And so after those 2 pilots, we've actually been able to do different project types. So on the left, you see 222 Broadway, which is an office to residential conversion. And on the right, you see it was a full takedown of a building where they needed to do the windows first. And then from each of those were about 200 tons of glass. This 222 Broadway was quite interesting because the means and method of this project were really challenging. There was no loading dock. There was no way to leave a 30-yarder on site. And so what the contractor did, and the contractor was the one who decided to do this, and really grateful for them for making this decision, they figured out how to do a live loading strategy and still make it economically, essentially, low to no cost for them to do this. And they figured out with existing contracts how to make this happen on a really tight site. So in the UK, I just want to show this. They're actually about 2 years ahead of us. And Saint-Gobain is actually doing the reclamation. And what's interesting is they've really standardized how they do it. And they share this on every project, and they replicate this as a model. So it's really fascinating what you see. They make these tables, and they kind of fold the glass down, crack it in the middle, and have a hole that then drops into a bag, and then that bag is removed with those shards of glass in it. We have not yet standardized the process here in New York City, but I think that's okay. Every project we've done so far has different means and methods. Every pilot that I've showed used a slightly different approach to site separation and capture and loading, which I think is better because it means that it doesn't give the contractors an excuse to say they can't do it. Because I like to say back, well, actually, we've done it like 6 different ways. Pick your method because guess what? We've probably already tried it, or maybe you even have a different one. So this is currently the ecosystem that we're operating under. The pilot projects we've been doing with this glass recycler have captured that cullet, and for the most part, it's gone back into fiberglass insulation with some other outlets for glass. But I think we're also heading towards an ecosystem where we're not far from this going back into float. The pre-consumer recapture in the U.S. actually is going back into float. So I think what's interesting is this is sort of testing out the risk model of manufacturers maybe shying away from post-consumer glass as a feedstock. And I think we're not far away from getting that true circular ecosystem established. I think the other part of this that people maybe forget about is the fact that sand makes up really the majority of the material makeup of glass if you were to do it from mined resources. And sand extraction is significantly detrimental to both the environment, the physical environment in which it's working, and also, frankly, to the people that are involved. It's pretty nefarious and very violent. The side anecdote I have is that in working with a concrete sub on a building here, I was asking for information about where materials were coming from, and I asked them where the sand came from, and they actually threatened to walk off the job rather than tell me where it was coming from. So I don't think this is something where the U.S. is immune. I think this is a global problem. So I should say, so the benefit of using recycled glass cullet as a replacement for mined silica in glass products like fiberglass is that you can replace the silica as a component of the product. So for market adoption, we've been talking a lot about how do you do this? How do you really spread this to other projects? And I think we can take some cues from the UK's effort. And I think you really need to equip the people in the field. You remove hurdles. You remove the I've never done this from contractor markup, where maybe a lot of you are contractors, add 10 grand because you've just never done it before. Identify risks. So there are contamination concerns around glass if you find that it's hot. There's been a discussion about how to still make it a viable product for reclamation and processing for your use. You need to talk about making it easy to contract to do this. We've had a lot of discussions about how to get it into the specs early. And one of the pieces of advice I give to projects is to make sure you get it into the scope document before you award the demo contractor's work. Because if you do it afterward, it's a change order and they're going to charge unnecessarily for it. You also need to really engage the design community early to get that spec language in there. And most importantly, on the back end, what I tell the designers that I speak with is that you need to specify products that contain the post-consumer content from recycled architectural glass. Like identify that you want fiberglass produced with a certain content made from this feedstock. So what's been happening since that June 24 pilot effort at One Bryant Park is I've been holding a stakeholder working group every 6 weeks. We're about 80 people that are invited. We usually have about 40 people attend. And it is truly multi-stakeholder where we have everybody from the supply chain participating. So architects, contractors, processors, investors, city agencies. We do have some academic attendees, not very many, but really have everybody who has some skin in the game to try to make this work. And I think what's quite fascinating is they've been very open about sharing lessons learned, especially among the contractor community. I think in this way that has really benefited the effort to spread. We did those 2 pilots in 2024, and to date in New York City, I think by the end of this year, we'll complete around 20 pilot projects. And I'm not certain of the total yet. I'm trying to get the total tonnage by the December meeting of this group, but I think we're going to exceed 800 tons collected. I think that's pretty exciting. There's enough material that's been, there's enough demand for reclamation and recycling of architectural glass in New York City, so much so that the processor we've been working with is opening a new Newark facility in order to enable a closer location for this processing to occur. So I think in 1 year, it's been really meaningful, and we've had it's been really successful to at least get the process underway and have like the pieces in place. You have the processor, you have a buyer of the feedstock, and you have projects that are willing to take the risk and actually implement this. So with that, I would love to answer questions and would invite anyone who is interested in learning more or has a project in mind to email me, and maybe you'd like to join an upcoming meeting. That's it from me.
Thank you, Sydney. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. I, as always, have 1 or 2 to help set the table. So for those who weren't here for the first kind of couple minutes where Sydney and I are having a back and forth, this actually has, I will say, started to be done in the more New England area. Just this past week, I, at one of my job sites, had about 4.5 tons of glass in a 30-yarder go down to infinite recycled. This was all glass very similar to your demo examples, had storefront around it, was broken off, was scooped into a 30-yarder and sent out. In your pilots going from kind of, you said 2 in 2024 to many more than that, you said what, almost 20 now in 2025. Was there a linchpin or was there a kind of a realization moment? You said contractors coming in, really seeing that those first steps, they wouldn't have to take it themselves. But would you attribute it to maybe a spec being made and distributed through designers or maybe buy-in from the demo sub? What do you think was the most key point in that?
So that's a good question. I think Consigli doing it was a huge win because we had a contractor actually jumping in and offering to do something for the first time. I would say the other big win is I reached out to other owners in position and other people in my position at real estate companies, and I had a few of them do pilots. They committed to doing pilots as well. I think, though, honestly, probably the biggest game changer was that we connected with the largest reglazer, who is technically a sub here in New York City, and they do almost every exterior reglaze. And they, because of their position, their position within the sort of overall project structure as being the ones responsible for both the removal and replacement of the glass, but actually for the disposal of the IGUs they took out, it was like if they got on board with being able to take this glass and recycle it and figure out how it could be done, it all of a sudden unlocked so many projects because they were just involved with so many, and especially in their position, they didn't have to have buy-in from a demo sub. They were already sort of serving that purpose. So I think it was like we had those successful pilots, but then we were able to get these huge ones and show it was possible very quickly with even like crazy conditions, like having no loading dock and no space to drop a 30-yarder. And then we had a lot of quantity very quickly by the sheer fact that we connected with the people that were just doing a lot of the work.
Sure. Was there any connective tissue organization that took it? So I'll say there's a lot of interior projects working in interior construction. There's a lot of interior projects where I might have, I'll go linear feet because square feet's kind of hard sometimes, but say a project has 800 linear feet, probably 2 dumpsters worth of glass, maybe more than that, but sometimes less than that. I think it's hard sometimes to say, okay, maybe I can only fill up one 30-yard can, or maybe less than that. Was there anything in New York City right now that has smaller projects go, oh, I can contribute to that? Or is that something that the industry wants to kind of build towards?
So the discussion in the group because this is all kind of like for working it out in real time,
Sure.
I think that the notion of what project is too small to do has just recently come out, and I think the processor has said really like the minimum is 130-yarder full, and so if that's the case, the discussion is now, is there a collection point where these smaller projects could deposit their glass somewhere so that they could compile it from multiple projects and then fill a 30-yarder and then make hauling and processing like cost competitive, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But we are certainly not there yet. I think the systems problem aspect of this, of like how do you do some hub and spoke efforts of collection, is still very much in discussion.
Sure, sure. I could keep going on, but I'll open to the group. Any questions for Sydney from any kind of AEC perspective?
I'd like to talk about scale again because I think there's an interesting thing in the deconstruction reuse piloting things where sometimes it's actually easier to pilot if you have a smaller scale. You can try something out like piecemeal. And I'm wondering if the difference here, where more seems to be better, is that it's the partnership with the manufacturing, and that manufacturing innovation needs more material at scale in order to try these things out. What do you think?
I think there are a few things at play here because I'm with you. Usually you start these small pilots and like build from, you have the less risk, right? If it fails, like you can sort of write it off and be like, okay, I tried this and I'm not, I don't know, the building's not falling down, or I haven't like done 20 floors of flooring that are going to fail. We do have we partnered with Saint-Gobain in this instance for the original pilot, and it was nice. I think it helps having a clear offtake of the recovered material, where we knew they had a vested interest in wanting to do this, and that for them it was just a proof of concept, but there was already like a partnership between them and Infinite of knowing they would buy what came out of our project. But I think the other piece was that in order for it to be economically viable for Infinite to haul the material, like let me back up. Like Infinite has a business model where they have been processing glass for 5 years. They just never did it out of a existing building before. They'd take a bunch off float, like in Minnesota. Like they said they do 250 tons a day or some crazy number like that. So they already kind of had a financial model of just what it worked for them to like pull glass off a project and not have to charge the project because they can sell it back for a certain amount of money. Ours was a proof of concept where they probably would have been okay to not have they would have taken even less than a 30-yarder. But what's happened over time for the pilot is that the financial aspect of what they could sell the glass for and what they need to sort of like pay for the transportation and for the time for the people involved and for processing works out only with certain quantities of glass. And in this case, there's like a minimum that they're discovering out of the pilot process. So it's less risk. It's not the question of usually with a pilot that there's like you're taking on risk and you want to be small because if you fail, it's not a big deal and it usually costs less. For them, it's like it's a financial and the minimum that they can then take and sell, I think is the difference in this pilot. I hope that answered that question well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's really interesting.
See some familiar names on this call, actually, so it's nice.
Melissa Wenzel did have a question, obviously from Minnesota, Hennepin County. She had asked, she's looking to visit the Infinite Recycle Technologies on Monday. Anything she should look for, ask for, especially in the perspective of a policymaker? Oh, there she is.
And I joined late, so I missed most of your presentation, but that's why I registered so I can watch it again and see what I missed. But I've known about Infinite Recycled, I almost typed in recycling technologies for just about 5 months. And I'm so glad. We've been trying to deal with window glass recycling. Reuse is ideal, but that's obviously not where the market is right now. So as I go in with kind of a new lens or an open mind, what sort of things should I be looking for? What sort of questions should I be asking so I can understand the process better?
I'd say, what are you hoping to get out of it? Like, and I don't mean that flippantly. I mean, it really depends on the lens you're viewing this through. Maybe it would help if I understand your role within the ecosystem.
Absolutely. I should have introduced myself. I don't know you. You don't know me. I work at the environmental agency in Minnesota, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. We have a full-time equivalent, me, who's our built environment sustainability administrator. So doing everything I can to building materials out of landfills, trying to focus on the highest and best use, full reuse, adaptive reuse, deconstruction, recycling, etc. And they received a grant from us. I'm not the grant manager, but a colleague in my unit is. So it's required by law that we visit, but I'm using this as a learning opportunity.
I mean, so then I would say the questions you could ask is where does the most of their glass come from? How much of it are they actually able to recycle versus end up landfilling anyway? What's the contamination rate? And where does it go when they sell the cullet? Like what kind of products does it go into? Because I know it goes to more than just fiberglass. I would ask who are they working with? They may not give you everybody, but like are they unique to one manufacturer? Are they working with multiple manufacturers? What do they do with the PVB layers and the lamination, which I know the answer to, but I think, and then what's their diversion rate in terms of, I'd say high value uses versus like, what's the contamination aspect of this, and how much of that is actually coming out of their process? Those would be, I know the answers to those questions, but I think from your position, that might be the most interesting to ask.
That's great. That's fantastic. Thank you. I've been in this field for 6 years. I've been working for our environmental agency for 23, and I love the fact that I get to learn new things all the time. And again, I've been trying to drive this topic of diverting window glass from landfills anyways. And so knowing that we have such a strong market here in Minnesota for it and circular economy connectivity, I just want to learn more. So those questions are great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Connor?
Hey, thank you for the presentation. I know there's a lot of, cameras turned off, so sometimes you don't know if there's people out there or not, but yes, we're here listening, so appreciate that. Quick question, I guess. We haven't really explored the site separation aspect of this yet, but I know that in some of the work that I've done over the years, I work at Columbia Construction Company. It's a construction management firm that's mainly in New England area, occasionally outside of that. But the question I had, I guess, was from talking to the C&D waste processors that actually aren't doing the site separation, but or sometimes they are, but more broadly, are taking mixed hauls. And I think some of the questions came up here too about minimum quantities required. Frequently we don't have space on site for probably know if you're in New York City for like multiple dumpsters and things like that, it can be a challenge. So there's a lot of stars that have to align to get the space, to get the time, and to get the quantities. So with all that said, of course, if you can do it, great. But do you know if the sources are also looking at the C&D waste processors? Because I've physically walked those sites, seen piles of glass, and the processor is saying, yeah, we can separate it, but like nobody's buying it, right? So is it a contamination issue if it goes into a mixed haul and it's not site separated? Is it recoverable after that? Because like literally seen the mountains of glass at the C&D waste processor, and they're like, nobody's buying, it's too heavy, the transport costs, et cetera. Like it doesn't, it hasn't made sense. It has to be there has to be a market for the processor to sell it so that they don't landfill it. And otherwise it gets crushed and gets, reused for beneficial reuse in landfills. In Massachusetts, I don't know if they do it differently in other states, they call it a beneficial reuse designation within the landfill. So it's like not technically going into the landfill, but it's what's going on top of the landfill, those types of like nuances. So anyway, long story short is, do you know of the relationships with the processors that aren't doing site separation and how that might impact it?
Yeah, great question. So I know before I met Infinite, I had a lot of conversations with like the Cooper Tank folks here in New York City about what happens to glass. And they have been able to recapture it, and usually it will go into like roadbed striping. And even Infinite, if it's contaminated, it will go to that same purpose, like to bead blasting and roadbed striping. I think what's different with the way that what site separation allows. And we actually talked about this a lot in the working group, and I might be able to send you guys the document certainty put together, Saint-Gobain, about what glass they accept for feedstock into fiberglass. And then actually, like Infinite actually takes slightly more glass, is that if you site separate it, you have a much better chance of meeting the criteria for the manufacturer to actually take it and put it into something. What Infinite explained to me, and again, I'm not the processor, so please, you might have to confirm this with them, but they can take any kind of glass with some exceptions, but they can't take fire rated, and they can't, if you could have an entire 30-yard of glass, and if you threw a ceramic mug in there, it would contaminate the whole thing. And it's because if they're going to put it as feedstock into the furnace, especially for use for fiberglass, if there's if the ceramic gets in there, or I can't remember if it was like certain kind of metals, but I have to look back at the document, it'll like cause the furnace to explode, which is basically what they're trying to prevent with being very careful about contamination. So what I suspect is happening is that to your point, at the C&D processing facilities that exist now, it's mixed with stuff that they can't tell what's in there, right? So the manufacturer is going to be less likely to accept it because it has to pass all of these contamination requirements prior to acceptance. But that might be, I'm not saying that might be changing, but I think what we're trying to do also as part of the working group is get the manufacturer to be very, very clear about what they need the glass to meet in order to accept it. And so perhaps that's an interesting conversation, maybe with this, I see Mass DEP on the phone, and others who kind of work in the waste or in the regulatory industry is like, well, what does the glass need to meet in order for it to actually become more attractive to all of these to be procured for feedstock for manufacturers? And maybe there's, I don't know, there could be some alignment on like, how do you test for the contaminants and how do you prove a certain kind of, I don't know, what kind of tests could you do to make sure you can run it in these other uses? I'm not sure what the solution is yet, but I will say that's why the site separation has been so critical for the acceptance by a manufacturer to use it in a product.
Yeah, just to close the comment, and so I appreciate your perspective on it. I think like anything, getting to 95% purity or just glass without those, the 5% ceramics or other things that might get caught, whether that's a little bit of contamination, trying to do site separation, and maybe that dumpster gets a little contaminated, or even, like I said, walking through those C&D processors and, they have really good processes, but the cost and difficulty to get from 10% to 90%, that's generally, for most things in life, like that's kind of the easy part. But to get from like 90% to 95 or 90% to 98 or 99 or whatever the requirement is, like you could spend 10 times the budget to get that last 10%. And I feel like that's potentially where a lot of the stuff would potentially fall down. And considering that, so many projects and so much glass is, again, site separated is preferred, but we do a lot of projects. I'm sure everyone on the call does a lot of projects where they might not have the option. And so whether it's, does the manufacturer have to figure out how to get the purity? Do they accept a less pure product and then they do the last filtering? Or can the C&D processors figure out how to get to 98% or whatever the criteria is? Because again, I like the idea, and it's admirable to see the work you're doing on like the flagship projects, but just I'm imagining you have a lot of projects that throw glass away that don't do it because it's not it's not the quantities, or it's not the right project for it. So trying to capture that other massive part of the industry, all the projects that aren't on the call here, So thank you for your comment.
Yeah, quickly, Connor, I would just say anecdotally, because the first time I done it on a project in Cambridge for a tech client was just this past week. And there was a bit of a run up to it, probably a month of telling both the demo sub, the owner, and the designer, we're looking to do this. Now, is there always that much time? Maybe, maybe not. But I would say talking to the demo subs, and maybe Sydney, you've experienced as well. If they go into a space that has a typical interior fit out that you need a demo, they're usually going to hit the glass first, simply because it, in their perspective, makes a mess. So there will still be carpet tile down. There will still be the furniture will probably be removed. But what I was able to find is that because they're usually targeting that glass first, and for us, it was tempered glass. All they did was take you saw in the picture of Sydney, a hammer. They actually took almost like a pick and a hammer and just hit it, crumbled it down, and just had hampers and just scooped all of the glass that was broken up into that went into a dumpster that went out. Granted, they might not always do that. Maybe there's 50 demo tradespeople on site at once to try and get everything out. But I think if, much like other site separation, if you can target it with timelines and I have 5 days to demo and I have these material streams, I think working with the designer to make sure it's eventually in the bid spec, but also just kind of holding hands at first and saying this is what we want to do. It worked surprisingly well. We ended up doing it on T&M because they had thought it would be about a $3,000 labor ad. They realized it wasn't the case. There was a little bit of labor ad because they didn't quite know what they were doing at first, but they got quite good at it. And this is only about 45,000 square feet over 2 floors. So I think there's industry hesitation, and maybe Sydney, you can back this up, but going from the 2 to then 20 projects, it's easier than you think. It's just we're a really risk-averse industry.
Yeah, what is really funny, I mean, not funny, but of course, now it's like, of course this is going to happen, is that sub who did our project, Waldorf, now they keep getting awarded all these interior jobs because they know how to do it. And they're like, yeah, okay, no problem. So I think it is because you don't have to keep the glass whole unless you want to, and it is possible to keep the glass whole. And some projects, like putting it on A-frames, they prefer that as a removal methodology. It is actually easier than you think, I would say. There's a colleague of mine who was like, sometimes I like to tell the contractors, oh, this looks really difficult. I don't know if we can solve this. And then, they suddenly figure out a way because it's a challenge. So I do think it's something where timing-wise, you found another source. That hauler doesn't have to dispose of it. It's heavy. Like, it kind of actually benefits a lot of people if you really understand if you understand it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, actually site separation is way easier than I thought.
Rhonda, I see you holding your hand up. Oh.
Sorry,
You
I
may be
can't hear
on
her.
mute. I cannot hear you either. Happens.
Let's see, does it work now?
Yes.
All right, I'm having audio issues today. I'm asking what I'm trying to. I showed up late, so I'm sorry, Sydney. So I didn't hear that first part, and I'm come from the owner's perspective. So I would love to hear more. Like, I wish I was there like 10 minutes before. So maybe I'll email you to ask more questions if you don't mind, or even join one of your meetings. But Mike, you mentioned you're doing it here, and I'm just trying to, from an owner's perspective, like, okay, you can ask the design team, the CM, to focus on this. What I'm trying to understand is, like you're saying I'm reading the chat, it said, as long as you can get it to New Jersey. What does that mean? Like, how are you managing the logistics of this so it's not complicated? I'm just trying to understand. Yeah. Because I missed that first part, so I'm pretty sure I missed something along the way.
Sure. I will quickly say, as a caveat, it was more expensive than thought, and seemingly the first time it's been done in this area. I believe there is a lot of room for refinement, and there's a lot of, well, I think it would cost this, but I don't know. Well, that's a lot of transport and growth of it. But with a client that was willing to eat a little bit of the cost to make a point of proving it out, the proof of concept is there. Obviously, New York City is a much more realized market. But there's just so much supply, I would say, here, and so much desire. The Mass DP's on the call. They see glass a lot going in the wrong direction on their solid waste master plan for C&D processors. Right. They're just, I think, a collaborative effort between groups like this, owners especially, contractors and designers. I think a lot can be moved, but I will have to say, in full transparency, it was more expensive than it should have been. And without a client willing to put up the money for it, it would not have been financially viable versus simply just putting it in an $800 usual cost around here and getting rid of it to landfill.
Yeah, and maybe I can... So from the owner's perspective, we don't want it to cost more, and we don't want it to take more time, right? Yeah. And what worked for us is that in this case, the site separation did not take more time, and this was on an interior job, and they're seeing this also on the exterior projects as well. The hauler for the glass is also the processor in most cases. I have done a project with them where they partnered with a local hauler, and that local hauler brought the glass to their processing facility. And in that case, I did pay more for the hauling because it was contracted out. The cost that is incurred is when the transportation is excessive for the project, which I think is what has happened with something coming from Boston
Yes.
to their New Jersey facility. Right now, New Jersey, from New York projects to New Jersey, it's cost neutral as long as you can meet a 30-yard, basically 30-yard threshold for, a tonnage threshold for that 30-yarder. I have the only one I've incurred a cost on was on the additional hauling. And I know depending on the size of the project, like depending on if the exterior, if it's an envelope reglaze project versus interior, the costs are very different, meaning there has to be a discussion with the processor and with the CM about what this looks like. But right now, in my mind, I have not, on the demo side, from the demo contractor, I have not seen someone charge me for their labor or reduce their costs, which they should, because they're not tipping it, and it's very heavy. So I would start arguing with my demo guy, being like, guys, you're not tipping this. And then I would say it's that distance from the site to the processing location. I saw some conversation about live load. So for the 20 plus projects that have happened in New York City, they've done it where they've dropped a 30-yarder and they've loaded it, like let's say overnight in a loading dock, and then they've hauled it the next morning. They've also done live loads. I've done a live load with an interior project where we brought the 30-yarder in, we stored the glass on one of the floors, brought it down in a freight, loaded it on a Saturday morning, and then they took it away that day. That office to residential conversion project you saw, it was live loaded over, I don't know how many weekends, but they did it on a Saturday. So it's been all types. And then on bigger projects where it's like a full demo, and Keena or anyone else could probably talk about this more, they had like 2 30-yarders sit on site. And then they just filled the 30-yarders. So it's been done multiple ways. And I think we haven't been mandating, like in the group, means and methods. That's up to the contractor to work out. But I think having Infinite as a hauler has been also one of the keys to making it work. Is that a lot of information right there?
Yeah, and just following up with what I put in the chat and what Sydney said, I had it live loaded over 2 nights. Essentially, the demo sub shedded it all, scooped it all into about 14 hampers, which over 2 nights were then put into the same 30-yard dumpster that was transported back and forth between there. And then the third party, which Infinite had worked with us to procure, picked up that 30-yard dumpster directly from a warehouse and then took it down. I'll probably get a recycling receipt in the next day or two. But I guess having that more local infrastructure, I think, is very, really important for keeping the costs down because of proof of concept. Of course, it works if you can transport things around, but is it really palatable, not only for finance, but also carbon? If we're transporting it that far, does it quite make sense? Sure.
Yeah. It becomes challenging, or you need it like next to rail or barge or something, and you need to do it at scale.
What would it take to get the local infrastructure? Do we need Infinite to move up here too? I'm asking the question.
Well, to be honest, before we were connected with Infinite, I had a lot of conversations with CertainTeed and Saint-Gobain of like, do we need to create a new cullet facility in New York City or something that would make it, to your point, Michael, about being less obscene in terms of the transport energy, frankly, that occurred. We were talking about a plant in Ottawa for a while to pilot this with, to produce the cullet, and then we would send it to Georgia for manufacturing fiberglass insulation. And so it was like, oh, is this even a thing? Like, maybe we should wait 5 years and develop a new cullet processing facility. And I will say, there are other processors. There are other glass processors out there. I have not yet worked with them, but I know that other manufacturers, like I know CertainTeed, Saint-Gobain has worked with other manufacturers to do glass processing, and there are other glass processors around the country. I haven't like tested them in terms of their capabilities of taking the same range of architectural glass and being able to process it into cullet for use. But I do think the solution is either cleaner forms of transit where you can carry a lot more, like a rail solution or a barge solution, or local, more spoke and hub where it's local processing. That'd be that's my uninformed answer, as I'm not working for Department for DP.
I mean, I think this is great because this is kind of part of the ongoing conversation locally, is like, how do we create an ecosystem locally? And is this an opportunity? You know, I don't know. I'm just asking the question. What does it look like?
There's a lot of opportunity. Just in the couple projects I have, obviously, Columbia's on here, Consigli's on here as well, and we only make up a small portion of what we're seeing here. There's just so much that could potentially go out. It's just without that connective tissue, which has come up not only in this meeting, but several others, and that lack of regional kind of infrastructure, it doesn't make sense to constantly send all glass to Newark, or all glass coming out of the Boston plus area down to the tri-state area, simply because it's too far away. So how can we not only advocate as an industry, but also work with policy? Obviously, the Embodied Carbon Council for the Mass Climate Omnibus, the Mass DEPs here, really working with ways to maybe it becomes a full-on waste ban item, and then from there can be grant incentives to create something, because it's very much needed and completely doable. There's just that lack of the central figure that would accept it and process it into something new. We're almost at time. Any other final questions for Sydney?
I have a quick one. When you put this into the contract documents, is it just putting in like the construction waste disposal spec section that the glass should be sent to Infinite Recycled?
So I have great draft spec documents that Gensler actually produced and has shared with the working group. And if I will ask them, but if this group is interested in getting those draft documents to see how the spec language has been put into documents, I'm happy to. Again, I have to ask them if they're okay distributing it to a larger audience, but that would answer your question.
Cool.
Yeah, I would definitely say yes, please, on that. There's been a lot of requests, not only from industry, but our own working group members on what do better construction waste management specs look like, and slowly kind of refining that to, I imagine it's something as simple as items that cannot be landfilled, having architectural demo glass underneath that, and then having another caveat of must be site separated and sent to closed loop recycler or something like that as a requirement, and then dealing with industry as they and haw about that's going to be so much more expensive, but knowing that as a project requirement, this is what it must take. So if you could share those documents, it'd be lovely. Mike Elliott, in the last few minutes, what do you got?
I just wanted to comment. I know that I have one other colleague here from Mass DEP that we are here. We're listening intently, so it's not falling on deaf ears. So in my role at Mass DEP, I'm responsible for coordinating our C&D materials management program, which basically involves working closely with the C&D processors that Connor was referring to. I will just say about couple things. Just this year, we launched a waste reduction innovation grant. So if we want to get Infinium here, or another potential recycling outlet, we should look at some of the financial incentives that we have. I don't know if it would be enough to convince a company to move here unless there was some certainty that they were going to get a certain amount of feedstock. I think the other thing I hear loud and clear is that, site source separation is key to this. I have no confidence that our processors could ever produce a product clean enough, to meet the specs. However, we are really trying to encourage them to do to work more closely with the construction management firms and help to encourage job site source separation. But as we all know, it comes down to economics. For these, they're waste companies. These processes are run by waste companies. They make their money bringing loads in and shipping material out for disposal. And I think the recycling is just a little bit, that's just a little bit of sugar on top that they make a little extra. It reduces some of their costs, but it doesn't drive their business model. So it's got to be economical for them to do, and that's the challenge we're having.
Apologies, I lost audio for a bit there, but thanks, Michael. You probably don't know this. I've been following your DEP groups for like 12 years, and I was like so impressed with all the work you did with drywall. So I kind of keep an eye on you guys.
Glad to hear. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're essentially at time. I did want to mention one thing, and I don't know if Melissa Wenzel's still on, but Andrew Ellsworth, who's presented to this group before, announced that there is a reuse pro training. So this is probably mostly for the people who are watching the recording, but happening on hopefully you can see on the screen, happening on December where is it? 6th and 9th, I believe. It's down here somewhere.
5th and
Yes.
9th.
Yes, there will be webinars on what does it take to, there we go, 5th and 9th, to become a reuse pro and develop all of this. So I wanted to definitely share that. I can include the email as well for those who don't have it with the meeting materials, but a lot of cool things happening. And once again, have to thank our Minnesota counterparts in Hennepin County for being so progressive and forward thinking with all this and really pushing for circularity. Awesome. With that, I won't keep anyone longer. Thank you so much once again to Sydney for presenting. We will give a recap of this with some notes and the recording that goes out next week. And thank you everyone for taking the time. We will see you next month for an annual recap of all our meetings, which I believe is December the 19th. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This
Have a
is
good
great.
one.
Thank you.